Hi, I'm Maya, and today I want to talk about some books that I've read recently. So I have been reading the series of Unfortunate Events books. I have read the first four, and so far I'm really enjoying them. Obviously they're meant for children, but I think they're still a lot of fun. And the first one made me cry a lot just because I was so sad for the orphans, felt so bad for the children. And the first one is a really good starter to a series because it's really good at setting the scene and introducing you to your protagonists and just setting the tone of gothic and dark humor and all of that fun stuff. I think so far the first book is still my favorite. I don't think any of the other ones I've read are quite as good as that first one, but I'm still enjoying watching their misadventures and rooting for them. The author definitely has a set formula that he follows and it works, and he's smart to do that. I like how he leaves little hints for his readers to figure out what's going on. I think that's a good way to teach children how to figure out mysteries, and is probably a good way for them to sink their teeth into this genre. Maybe could be kind of like training wheels for them, helping them to go on to read maybe some more advanced and complicated mysteries. I think the author has a lot of fun pushing the envelope and like doing different things that you don't typically see in a novel format, like having a whole page of just the same word over and over again, and like having an entire paragraph repeated again to sort of simulate how it feels when you're reading something but it's not really sinking in, so you're just like reading it over and over again because your mind's somewhere else. Yeah, very experimental and fun, and mostly just really funny, really clever. I definitely laughed out loud a few times reading these books. Just clever, witty, and some fun puns and jokes, and a lot of the characters' names match like their personality or their character, like a physical attribute about them, which is a great way to teach children vocabulary. Oh, and speaking of that, whenever the author introduced a word that maybe is a word that children maybe wouldn't be as familiar with, he usually gives them a definition in like a fun way. I have a daughter, and I think when she's old enough to read, she's still a baby, but when she's old enough, I think it could be fun to read these with her, because I think that's where they can be enjoyed to their fullest, is watching a child enjoy them. And I have not seen any of the movie or TV adaptations or anything like that, so I don't really know anything about those. Can't speak to that, but maybe once I finish this series, maybe I could watch some of those and maybe see how they compare. Yeah, so that's The Bad Beginning, The Reptile Room, The Wide Window, and The Miserable Mill. They're all good, and I'm excited to read the rest of them. Okay, the next book I want to talk about is The Perils of Lady Catherine de Bourgh by Claudia Gray. And this is the third installment in the Miss Tilney and Mr. Darcy series. I've talked about them on my channel, so you can check out my other videos about those. The first one is Murder of Mr. Wickham, and the second one is The Late Mrs. Willoughby. And so this is the third one. Really fun books, but I am a little frustrated because I wanted Miss Tilney and Mr. Darcy to get together at the end of this book, and guess what? They don't. I feel like a broken record. I feel like I said the same thing about the second book, so I guess this is just gonna keep going on and on forever, but that's okay. I think my favorite part of this book was learning more about Lady Catherine de Bourgh. I liked delving more into her character and learning how she goes through life as a mother. In the original Pride and Prejudice book, she is such a villain. She is so annoying. She's just a big obstacle for Lizzie and Mr. Darcy to get together. In this book, she becomes more human. She definitely has more humanity to her, and you realize why she's so controlling of her daughter, and you do come to respect her a little bit more. There was a really funny part in this book that made me laugh out loud, and it was Mr. Collins, he's just the ultimate butt kisser, right? Like when you read Pride and Prejudice, you're just like, oh my gosh, why are you so annoying? Will you ever shut up about Lady Catherine? And so there's a scene where he's sitting there and he introduces his two children, his son and his daughter. And he's like, their names are Catherine and Bourgh. So he named his children after this woman. And that just totally matches up. Like, from all of Jane Austen's descriptions of this character in the original work, that definitely checks out. I can definitely see him doing that. It feels so real, so authentic to his character. Yeah, so basically there are some attempts on Lady Catherine's life, and Juliet and Jonathan have to come in and solve the mystery and see who's been trying to attack her, and hopefully, you know, prevent the murderer from being, the attempted murderer from being successful. So it's a fun premise. I don't think like the whole story is as good as the first two books. I think mainly because the first book feels like such a big crossover event. It has a character from literally all of Jane Austen's books, and then Mrs. Willoughby has fewer characters, and this one has even fewer characters. So that part's not as fun you don't really get that same vibe, but it is still a good book, and I still enjoyed it, and I'm waiting for the fourth one now because I need to see Juliet and Jonathan get married. That's all I need to see. I don't know what she's going to be able to do for the fourth one, because how many different ways can there be a murder in this time period, in this setting? I don't know. I just hope she doesn't run out of ideas, and I hope that the fourth one is a good conclusion. I feel like we don't need to stretch it out any longer. I just want to have the nice proposal and wedding. Super fun series. Definitely recommend. And the last book I want to talk about is The Beautiful and Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. So first of all, I went my whole life hearing about this book, and I thought, like I could have sworn it was called The Beautiful and the Damned. But apparently not. It's The Beautiful and Damned. There was not a second thought. Is this the Mandela effect? Anyway, I have been on a big Fitzgerald kick. I talk about his other books on my channel, so you can check out those videos where I mention Gatsby and This Side of Paradise. This one is longer than the others, pretty sure. I don't know the exact page numbers, but even if it's not actually longer, it definitely feels longer, like it's more of a dense book. And I think that's necessary because it's such a journey, it's such an arc for the two main characters, Anthony and Gloria. They start out young and carefree and rich and spoiled and beautiful and materialistic and vain. They start out here and then they end down here. By the end of the book, they just seem like totally different people. Depressed, angry, bitter, drunk, actually like alcoholics, disillusioned. They've fallen out of love. They've lost faith in each other. They've let each other down, and they've really just become like the lowest of the low. They've lost a bunch of money. They just, yeah, another way to describe it is they go from being clean to dirty. That's a word that Gloria uses a lot. She likes things to be clean, and she has like a specific definition of clean. Like she only chooses friends that she thinks are clean. And so it isn't clean in the sense of pure, because Gloria is not pure, Anthony is not pure. They both make that very clear from the beginning, that they, you know, are fine being promiscuous and not innocent by any means. It's not like Fitzgerald's other book, This Side of Paradise, which is about losing innocence, stepping away from paradise, from the Garden of Eden. This book isn't like that, because Anthony and Gloria are already very familiar with the world. They're very worldly people. They know how the world works, and they feel comfortable in that setting. They celebrate being sinners, you know? So when they say clean, when Gloria says she wants clean friends, she doesn't mean virtuous, she doesn't mean having high standards. She means fashionable, chic, experienced. Those are the things that she looks for in her friends. Those are the types of people that she wants to surround herself with. Like-minded people, people that feel like her and act like her and make her feel good about herself. Because she is the most self-centered, selfish character I've ever read. And she's extremely childish. That's a huge part of her character. She eats gumdrops, she sleeps with a doll. She's just very much a little girl who never grew up on the inside. Even though on the outside she is, like I said, worldly, womanly. But really on the inside she's just a hurt little child that never matured and never got used to not getting what she wanted. Has just been spoiled her whole life and just really does not grow at all. She really doesn't have any growth willfully. And she's so vain, she's so obsessed with her beauty and her good looks and her body, And then when she feels like she's getting older, at the end of the book, there's this crazy scene where she goes to audition to be in the movies, and they basically tell her she doesn't have what it takes because she's getting too old. She can't be a leading lady. She could be like an older character, a side character. And that just like really rocks her world. And she goes home and looks in the mirror and she's like, oh, my beautiful face, my pretty face. And it's so sad just to think about that in terms of society and what we as a society value in women and the pressure we put on them to be beautiful and to meet certain beauty standards. It's so much pressure, it's so unhealthy, and Gloria really is a victim of that. And so I feel like that's the only scene in the whole book where I actually feel bad for her, because that does feel like it's something out of her control. It's something that all women have to deal with, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's Gloria. And then Anthony is also selfish and self-centered and all of that. And he is also supremely lazy and a coward. His main thing is that he grew up a spoiled rich boy. He wants to be that forever. His parents died when he was young, so he was basically raised by his grandfather, and his grandfather is gonna die soon, and Anthony and Gloria are banking on getting a large inheritance in the will. But then the old man comes unannounced to their house one day and sees them having a party and is so disappointed in them because he is like a prohibitionist. He hates alcohol and he sees them acting all drunk and disorderly, hates that party lifestyle, and he's a very religious man and they are not religious people, and he's just totally disgusted by them, writes them out of the will, doesn't leave them anything. And so most of the book is them trying to get it back, using their lawyer, trying to contest the will and see what they can get out of it. And the whole time that they're waiting, you know, their funds are dwindling, their savings are going down the toilet, and instead of stepping up and getting a job, Anthony just insists on continuing to live his life of leisure because he feels that that is what he deserves because of his status, because of his social class. He thinks that, you know, he was born an aristocrat and that's what he should be. He shouldn't have to work because he is inherently better than other people because of the circumstances of his birth. Spoiler alert at the end of the book. Like, this is a huge spoiler, so if you haven't read the book, if you're planning on reading it, just fast forward a little bit. But at the end of the book, you know, they're poor, they're destitute, they don't think they're going to get the money. And then they do. They do get the big fortune. And Anthony has everything he's always wanted, everything that he has always deserved. And he says, you know, I did it, look, it's how it was meant to be. Everyone told me to work, Gloria told me to work, my friends told me to work, but I didn't work because I didn't have to. And this is what was owed to me, and I'm so glad I didn't work. I'm so glad I proved them wrong. And it's just this really ugly moment, just so ugly, that he has learned absolutely nothing from this crazy long journey that we've been on, pages and pages of, you know, him hitting rock bottom and becoming someone that Gloria doesn't want to be married to, and having his friends be really disappointed in him, and he's just, you know, in this downward spiral. And then he shoots way back up to the top once he gets that money. But his character is so rotted that it is really all for nothing. He has all this money, but he doesn't have a happy marriage. He doesn't have close friends. He's just a bitter old man who has money and nothing else, really. But he's convinced himself that it's enough, that that's all he needs, and so he thinks that he's happy. But the reader knows that he's not. I really think this book would be good as a stage play. I kind of wonder if it would be better as a stage play than as a novel, just because there are those big emotional moments that I've been talking about with these characters, and it feels like, you know, they should be like really loud and big and on a stage where you can emote, and maybe not so much in a book, if that makes sense. I don't know, I still obviously love it as a novel, but I do think maybe the stages where the story could shine even more. I don't know if it would be that great as a movie. Okay, also speaking of movies, I have to be transparent about why I picked up this book. I'm a huge Gossip Girl fan. okay? And Serena van der Woodsen says that this is her favorite book, and she's on a movie set, like helping to make a movie adaptation of this book. So that has always stuck with me. It's always been in the back of my mind of like, oh, I should read that book sometime to figure out why it would be Serena van der Woodsen's favorite book. And it actually does check out. I can see why Serena would be drawn to this book, because it's basically her life. A rich young socialite, beautiful, has everything, New York setting, a party girl, can do whatever she wants. Yeah, very much. She's like a modern day Gloria Gilbert. Very interesting, the comparison, the similarities. But anyway, I do think it's funny that Serena supposedly has read this entire book, which I don't think she would have, if we're being real. Like, no offense to Serena, but I don't think she has the attention span for a longer book. I think some of Fitzgerald's themes, symbolism, lessons would probably be lost on her, if we're being real. Anyway, I think it's funny that Serena van der Woodsen supposedly read this whole book and didn't learn anything from it, and still kept living her crazy lifestyle, and didn't think about maybe donating some money to poor people, you know? Speaking of poor people, there is a scene in the book where Gloria and Anthony drive through this like slum, this really poor neighborhood, and they see all these people and they're so happy living their poor lives, and they just scoff and laugh, and they're like, oh, they're not really happy. They can't possibly be actually happy because they're so poor. Like, there's no way. Just so out of touch and so accustomed to living on top. They can't even comprehend that someone at the bottom could be happier than them. That reminded me of Christmas Carol, where Scrooge's nephew, they're talking, him and Scrooge is like, you're poor, what right have you to be happy? And then his nephew says, you're rich, what right have you to be miserable? That really sums up this book. So yeah, I do think this book is a cautionary tale, and not just about wealth and riches, but also about love and being careful about who you attach yourself to, because Anthony and Gloria are not a good match. They just are so toxic. There's so many toxic moments in this book where they both do horrible things to each other. It's like, why? They just are so vicious and vindictive and manipulative and just completely emotionally unhinged. It's like ridiculous. We see early on that they shouldn't be together. It's very, like at the very beginning of the book, when Anthony first meets Gloria, he admits to himself that he's not in love with Gloria so much as he is mad about her. So it is like insanity. It is like a sickness. He's just obsessed with the idea of her and not really in love with who she actually is. And that's why they don't last. That's why they don't go the distance, and why their marriage ultimately ends in a lot of misery. I think my favorite line in the book is this: he was young now as he would never be again, and more triumphant than death. It's just this chaotic story of being beautiful and young and rich and having everything going for you, and you know, the world is your oyster, and you're burning so bright because you're at your peak, you know, you're at your zenith, you are golden, and how long can that be sustained? Eventually you're going to burn out. Eventually all the flames and fireworks are going to fade, or going to turn to embers and ash, and that's all you're going to be left with in the end, because you are damned. You are doomed, because aging is inevitable, death is inevitable. You can't escape it, no matter how hard you try. This is something I've talked about in my video where I review This Side of Paradise. I talk about how relatable Fitzgerald is, just in the way that this book was written like 100 years ago, but it's still so applicable. I can say the same thing about all of his writings and his books, because there's a whole thing where Anthony meets Gloria, and they talk and they have fun and all this stuff, but he has to wait before he can call her. He like actually puts it on his calendar, like plans it out, counts out how many days before he will let himself call her back. And I have totally had friends like that set these guidelines and parameters for themselves and say, okay, I'm not gonna text him back until such and such a date. So yeah, humans really haven't changed that much. Yeah, I found the scene where Anthony and Gloria see all the poor people and think they can't really be happy. "I like these streets," observed Anthony aloud. "I always feel as though it's a performance being staged for me, as though the second I pass I'll all stop leaping and laughing and instead grow very sad, remembering how poor they are, and retreat with bowed heads into their houses." They have these crazy spending habits. They're just buying stuff they don't need and buying in excess and just spending money on cabs and clothes and booze and everything, and not being smart about their budget, not paying attention to their finances. They're just very irresponsible. Like I said, very immature. Never grew up. So, as always, I am enamored by Fitzgerald's descriptions, his imagery. I just really admire him as a writer. So I wanted to read this little part. "The hammock, a host of new dreams in tune to its imagined rhythm, while the wind stirred it and waves of sun undulated over the shadows of blown wheat, where the dusty road freckled and darkened with quiet summer rain." I think my ultimate favorite thing that happened in this book is that Fitzgerald mentions the side of paradise. I can't remember the exact scene, but I think a side character is talking about the women he's been dating or something like that, and they always ask him if he's read The Side of Paradise. So I like it when we can see an author have fun with their work and mention themselves, allude to themselves. I think that's really fun and clever. Especially because this book is supposed to be very autobiographical. Supposedly he drew on his own experiences, and Gloria is apparently very much based on Zelda, his wife. That's interesting when you read it from that perspective, to get more insight into who he was as a person and how that influenced his art. Very fascinating. You could definitely psychoanalyze him and Gloria. Oh, Zelda, I should say. That you can analyze the characters, Anthony and Gloria. You could also psychoanalyze the real life people, Fitzgerald and Zelda. This is something I also mentioned in my other video about The Side of Paradise. I mentioned how Fitzgerald's books are a time capsule, and this one is no exception. It was fun to feel like you're really in that flapper era, to hear about the music and the drinks and the fashion. I just love all that. I love feeling like I'm time traveling. I don't know what I'm gonna read next, but I've had a lot of fun reading all of these. Almost dropped. Yeah, so if you've read any of these, tell me what you thought of them. If you have any recommendations for what I should read next, let me know. Thank you so much for watching.